Tuesday, and my body was screaming. No, seriously, screaming. When I got out of the truck, my legs felt like jelly and I felt something hit my heels. I looked back and it was my butt. 2 days into the week, and I felt like I had worked my entire life. 12-hour days, all I wanted was to crash. But I didn't have a choice. 4 houses under construction, only half done. 2 more under contract, needing to be finished ASAP before closing. The new buyer on one house decided they wanted to change the countertops and the bathroom. On the other, all the ceiling fans needed to be replaced. The carpet in the master bedroom needed to be changed, and of course, repainted. Nothing major, but it added cost for the buyer, and pressure on me to get it done with my depleted crew. The recent COVID pandemic really messed us up, and I had to do a lot of the work myself with just a few helpers. Even the subs were struggling. They couldn't get their final payments until the work was done. The interim payments barely covered their costs to keep going. Today I had to tell them we were going to focus on one house at a time until the staffing situation got better. That didn't make my partner, John, happy. He's the one who has to deal with the lender who gave us the interim loans. Finance guy, as I like to call him. We both have business degrees, so we know our numbers. He's just better at charming people. I'm better at the building part. We make a good team, gotta give him credit. He tries to help when he can, but his skills are limited. Nobody was home when I got there. Not that I was expecting much. We don't have kids, and Victoria, my wife, is still working after 3 years of marriage, it seems. I went to the fridge for a cold beer. Found a 6-pack, so my night wasn't completely wasted. I looked in the fridge but didn't see any meat thawed. Nothing else that could make a meal. I wondered what Victoria had planned for dinner. We usually split the cooking duties. It was her week to cook. We alternate, one of us cooks for a few days and then we switch. About a month ago, Victoria got this idea that we should both cook for a whole week before we switched. It was supposed to help us plan our week. Not like it seemed to help her much. I wasn't really happy about the pizza she bought on our way home from work yesterday, late as usual. She's not the best meal planner. I got over my disgust with a half-assed meal when Victoria pulled my little guy out of my pants and gave me a top-notch blowjob. Victoria is really good at making me forget about minor annoyances. She continued the effort throughout the evening to make me tired and happy. Lord knows I've had some major ups and downs in the last half-decade. My first wife, Pandora, decided I wasn't good enough for her after 5 years of marriage. The only thing that saved my dignity was realizing I couldn't compete with her new lover. I wasn't even in the running. I had a penis and testicles between my legs while Pandora wanted a pussy cat. We split amicably, both financially whole. I think I might have been anatomically whole when I offered to watch her ex and her girlfriend do their thing. At least the ex had a good enough sense of humor to consider my request, as did her girlfriend. They still refused to let me watch them play, which was a major bummer. Her affair might have ruined my business because her girlfriend, Carol, was the twin sister of my business partner, John. John was furious at his sister, thinking she was intentionally trying to sabotage him. We had been reckless, investing every dollar we could beg or borrow into a large farm property that came up for sale when the elderly owner died. We had to work together, and he was afraid I would blame him for his sister's actions. John eventually calmed down when we all sat down and hammered out the details of my divorce. Pandora wanted the house we built. In exchange, she gave me half the money she was going to use to start a business and all the cash we had. She even mortgaged the house. We were all happy, or at least content, with the deal. She had persuaded her parents, who still liked me, to lend me money at a minimal interest rate. We are still friends and she wanted to support my business endeavors. Of course she was an investor, as was her lover. Pandora and Carolyn even convinced me to agree to be the father of a few kids for them sometime in the future when they were ready. I asked if we were going to naturally artificially inseminate. Once again, my proposition was not taken in the spirit in which it was offered. Carolyn told me we could naturally artificially inseminate, but she would be mimicking a praying mantis. But she wouldn't bite my head off. She actually seemed serious. Sounds like the plot of a cheesy porn story. I know because I am an avid reader of online porn. I even write a few stories. It's one of my hobbies when I have time to indulge. One of the things that helps me unwind and escape from real life. I keep that part of my life private. I accidentally mentioned it to Pandora once after I had a few too many drinks. She and Carolyn had invited me to dinner. She thought I was joking and just wanted her to describe her activities with Carolyn. I grinned and let her believe that. Truthfully, I really wanted to see her and Carolyn in action. That taught me not to tell Victoria about my hobby. She's a realtor, just starting out working for the brokerage firm where John and I list houses. I wanted to help the beautiful blonde 29-year-old girl succeed, so I listed a house with her. As a listing agent, she had to split the commission with her brokerage. But the cash flow made her feel great. So great that she decided to accept my offer of a date. She was a teacher for the first 7 years after graduating college. She had never been married and had no children. She told me she was tired of punky teenagers and wanted a career change. Real estate seemed fun and didn't require much additional education, so she took classes at night and got her license. We dated for 6 months before getting married 3 years ago. Of course, she knew all about Carol and Pandora because we hung out regularly. Victoria teased me a little about getting cuckolded. I was surprised she even knew the word cuckolded. It's not a word that comes up in normal conversation. She just shrugged off my comment. I joked that I really couldn't compete because I had the wrong equipment. I told her the most upsetting thing was the lack of honesty. Pandora and Carol had been having sex for a while before they came clean and confessed that they were in love. I didn't have a clue. I thought the two women were just enjoying each other's company because they hung out so much. I wouldn't have been so upset if Pandora had just come to me and told me the truth. I knew Pandora had experimented in college. She told me then that she was mostly into women and her experimentation period was with a man, which was me. I was still emotionally hurt enough to make Victoria sign a prenuptial agreement that if either of us cheated, he or she would only receive 15% of our joint assets and no alimony. For us, it was mostly cash assets because the business was excluded, as was the house we live in. It's the house I built right after the divorce. I needed a place to live, and being a builder gave me a huge advantage with equity. I certainly can't complain about my sex life with Victoria. She's hot in bed, in the kitchen, in the living room, or anywhere we happen to be. She still teases me every once in a while about Pandora leaving me for a woman by saying Pandora must have just liked the taste of pussy, because my cunnilingus skills were definitely up to snuff. She said my penis was big enough to do the job unless Pandora only liked big dildos that could stretch her out. I've always thought penis size was relative to body size. I haven't measured my penis since I was a teenager, but it's long enough to cover my belly button. Victoria once slipped up and said that was a better comparison than how it fit in her mouth. She refused to tell me how many she'd compared it to. I really don't want to know, as long as mine is the only thing she's touching now. I had just put on jeans and a t-shirt after showering and was heading towards the kitchen for a second beer when the front door opened and Victoria walked in. My irritation rose as I observed two things. First, she didn't have anything that resembled food in her hand, and second, she wasn't alone. Her boss, Greg Robinson, was walking in with her. Greg wasn't Victoria's real boss. His wife, Melinda, founded Robinson Realty a few years ago. Greg had been working for a car dealership for a few years, and when his wife's real estate brokerage started to grow, he got his broker's license and joined the firm. I'm not sure if he's good at real estate or not. Melinda is the one who signs on all the closing documents. She's clearly the brains behind the brokerage. "Forgot it's your week to cook, honey?" I asked Victoria while eyeing Greg. He always had this suggestive smirk on his face, or at least that's how it felt to me. Other people called it charming. He was a handsome man with a captivating aura. No wonder he sold cars so well. He could charm anyone into buying. I don't know if he was good at real estate or not. "Good evening, Dave," he greeted me. "Oh, sorry, honey. Greg took me out to dinner. Melinda's out of town. She took the boys to her parents' house. They'll be there all week," Victoria responded cheerfully. "How about I make you an omelet?" I didn't respond. Something was off here. I wondered why Greg was here. If he was taking Victoria out for dinner because his wife was out of town, why wasn't he going home afterwards? I poured myself a second beer while pondering this. This wasn't good. I'd seen this scenario play out many times, not in person, but in the countless stories I'd read. Hell, I'd even put similar scenes in my own stories. I felt a chill run down my spine. "I'll be right back." "Gotta use the bathroom," I said, grabbing my beer. I put it on the table and suddenly realized I didn't want to leave it unattended. My imagination was on hyperdrive. I went into the bedroom, pulled my cell phone off the charger, and went into the bathroom. I turned on the video function and tested it. I was glad I'd put on a t-shirt with pockets instead of a regular t-shirt. I had a feeling Victoria was going to want to go out to dinner instead of cooking when she finally got home. I did one other thing while I glanced at the closet where I kept my wallet. I stepped out. They were sitting at the kitchen table. I sat across from Greg. I wanted him on the other side of the table if things went the way I was fearing. "So?" I asked, as neutrally as I could. I could feel my voice shaking from the adrenaline rush. I berated myself. Nothing had been said, and I was already reacting. "I wanted to talk to her about what I found on her computer," Victoria said. And now that surprised me. I was expecting her to say, "We need to talk." I didn't ask what she was talking about. I just looked at her. I needed to look something up and my laptop is in the car, so I used the computer in her office. I noticed some weird files. "Oh crap," I thought. She found my story files. Now I'm going to have to explain my little hobby. "So, why is Greg here?" I asked, my voice rising. This seems like a conversation between us. I sure as hell didn't want to explain my activities in front of him. Not that I was ashamed of my stories. I just wanted to keep my writing activities private, if that was even possible anymore. "Well, I told him what I found," Victoria said, "and I felt like he should be here for this." I bristled again. I didn't say a word. I waited, my stomach starting to churn again. "There were a few files that I found really, different. Then I checked your browser history. It seems you read a lot of porn. A lot of it seemed to be about women having sex with multiple men. Some pretty wild stuff, like incest or bondage." Then I went back to the first story I found. It was titled "The Psychology and Expectations of the Cuckolded Husband." That one really surprised me. I asked her if she had read it. "Well, obviously not the whole thing. It looked like you were taking notes. There were lots of bullet points about what a cuckolded husband should do and things he could do for his wife and her lover. Some of them would be pretty humiliating for the guy. Kind of freaky too." I didn't tell her that the article didn't really exist. I'd made up the title and the bullet points to use in a story I was writing. It was about a wife who just laid out her idea of her having a lover with her husband just like what she expected him to do. She quoted the article as her source material. In my story, the guy didn't react well. I never finished the story. I couldn't figure out a satisfactory way for him to respond to his cold, cheating wife other than violence. I wanted a different answer to the offense. Oh, I had plenty of actions to see how they felt. None of the actions felt right, or they had been done so often that my approach was cliché. I put the story in reality limbo to work on a story about an alternate society where judicial slavery existed. Apparently, Victoria hadn't read my story file. She had been too busy looking at notes and browsing my history. "I realize you have fantasies about your wife cheating on you and making you accept her boss," Victoria said. I stared at her. I knew I was blushing. Not that I was embarrassed by her comment, but that she was saying this in front of Greg Robinson. "I guess it's because Pandora cheated on you with a girl. Maybe you think you're not good enough or something." I didn't think that. "We'd discussed this before." She wasn't finished. "We talked about this, and you definitely have a big enough to satisfy any normal woman. And your cunnilingus skills are amazing." I had to speak up. "And why are we discussing this in front of Greg?" I asked. "Isn't all this private and not for public discussion?" "Well, yeah, normally," Victoria said. "But Greg and I have talked about it. We debated a little bit and concluded that we need to come to an understanding. He's here to help us, to bring your secret fantasies to life." I almost choked on my beer. "Again?" I asked, wiping my mouth. "And he's going to have sex with me, sometimes while you watch, and sometimes we'll have sex, and then you can have sex with me," Victoria said, as if this was completely normal. "But Greg has a few hang-ups." "Go on," I said. My sarcasm was gone. "Okay, he can't have sex with Victoria after she's had me and her," Greg said. "He can't put his dick in another guy's jizz, so he'll go first. On the days that you have sex with her first thing in the morning, he'll wait until she douches or skip that day, just like we do now. And oh, that got my attention, just like we do now. And of course we won't expect you to suck her to get her hard. I don't want that. Just like you licking her clean after you have sex with Victoria." "I know those are in your notes," Greg said rationally. "You can lick her pussy after I have sex with her, if that's your thing. Or you can have sex with her. I know from what Victoria read about your fantasies you would enjoy that." I stared at them. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Victoria, who I loved and trusted, who I married because I thought she was the woman of my life, wanted me to participate in a bizarre sex game with her boss. And Greg, who I thought was harmless, was willing to play along. You guys are saying what?" I stammered. Victoria smirked. "Don't pretend you don't know what we want, Tom. You wrote about it in your stories." I couldn't believe it. Victoria had read my porn stories, and now she was using them to push this bizarre sex game. No, that's not true. I just write stories. I never thought about actually doing that, I countered. But you want to try it, don't you? Greg said, a suggestive gleam in his eyes. You want to see us having sex together. You want to feel the thrill of sharing Victoria with another man. I turned to Victoria. Greg said, just like we do now, so you two are having sex. My voice caught in my throat, dry as the desert. Victoria blushed and nodded. My stomach churned again, nausea rising in my throat. That cold, detached feeling washed over me, as if I was writing these words, not living through them. Yeah, we have been for a while, Victoria admitted, her voice a whisper, full of remorse. I asked her how long. Maybe a year. We weren't doing it regularly at first, but lately probably 2 or 3 times a week, Victoria said, as if listing items on a grocery list. I told her I never noticed her being extra wet or having semen on her. Yeah, I always douche after you two are done. I totally messed up my bacteria system. That's why I've had a yeast infection. My gynecologist told me not to douche, unless it was after my period. I've been doing it too often. Now that we're out in the open, I won't have to clean myself up all the time. No, you won't, I said, my voice strangled by an unseen hand. Victoria beamed, completely missing my point. So why are you bringing this up today? I asked, my voice as cold as ice. Well, I've wanted to do this before, but Greg was nervous. We decided it was time. We tried doing it in his guest room or a motel. But motels are expensive. And he got worried that his wife would come home and catch us, which wasn't fun anymore. Lately we've been using our friend Jim's spare room, Victoria admitted, as if sharing a funny secret. Jim got divorced and only has his son on the weekends, so he lets us use his place during the week. So, Melinda doesn't know about this, I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Oh no, she'd freak out. She wouldn't want to share, Victoria said, innocently. So you don't get it on with Melinda while I'm having sex with Victoria? I asked, trying to hide the sarcasm in my voice. I thought Greg would pick up on the mockery in my question, but he was so worked up that he didn't recognize it. Damn no, Greg yelled, his voice sharp. Melinda is the line. I don't have cuckold fantasies. What if I got a girlfriend when you're busy? I asked, curiosity replacing anger. I wasn't even angry, which surprised me. Somehow I was shutting down inside. I'd made a decision. I just wanted information. Oh hell no, Victoria said. You're not getting out of pussy. I'm enough woman to keep your balls drained. In fact, if you even mention it again, you'll be punished, Victoria smiled as if she liked the idea. I know that's how it works in those rules I read. I'm thinking about things I could do. I could lock your dick in a chastity cage. I could sit on your face after Greg has had his way with me. Pretty sure you'd never volunteer for that. Not at first anyway. Only having sex with me after Greg has had his way with me is going to be your limit right now. But I'll push the other stuff if you're a bad boy. She wasn't just smiling, she was giggling at the idea. Okay, 2 more questions. Did you guys have sex today? And did you mention that Melinda didn't know? I asked. She has no idea, right? Greg replies, of course Melinda doesn't know. That's the point. She could never find out. And yeah, I had sex with Victoria this afternoon before we went out to eat and talked about coming here. We were going to go upstairs to your bedroom and do it again. You could watch if you wanted. Then I was going to leave and you could do your thing. You could put your dick in her wet pussy or lick it. Whatever you like. Yeah, you could totally have her back. Victoria giggled. Your boy's a bit bigger than Greg's, so that would be fun. I thought about something else. Victoria, a few months ago you said your biological clock was ticking and that we could consider having a baby. I asked. How would that work? Have you thought more about it? Oh yeah, Greg and I have talked about it, Victoria said. When we're ready, I'll stop taking the pill. We've discussed a few options. First, it would just be a crapshoot to see whose sperm hits first. You've seen Greg's sons, both are handsome, so it would be cool if he got me pregnant. You'd have to sign a paper saying you'd agree to raise any kid no matter who the father is. The other option, which I like better, is that I get to choose the father. Then the other dude has to wear a rubber or not have sex with me until I'm pregnant. Like in the stories. Greg chuckled and said that he hated condoms. Victoria grinned at him and winked. Her choice of father was clear. I smiled calmly. I'd heard enough. How about I choose door number 3? I suggested. Turning to Victoria, you remember our prenuptial agreement. She nodded but said that since I wanted this to happen, the prenup wasn't an issue. We could just void it. All right, so this is my decision, I said. Greg, you're going to get up and leave my house. You can sit outside and wait for Victoria to pack her clothes. She can bring them out to you and you can put them in your car or hers. Then you can take her back to your house and have sex with her all you want tonight because Melinda's not home. His surprise turned into a dark scowl. His face was red. You can keep Victoria there or pay for a hotel. I don't care. I just know she's not staying here. Now, if you two are busy and can get this done quickly, I might not call Melinda tonight. He began to stammer. Now, my first choice is to throw this beer bottle in your face, let it smash, and then stomp on the broken glass shards into your flesh. But I don't want to go to jail. He looked really agitated, so I added, that's also why I'm not picking up the Glock that's sitting on my lap and shooting you with 9mm rounds. But if I recall my rights in this state, once I tell you to leave my house and you don't, you're trespassing. I can have you arrested. If you come at me with all these warnings, I'll assume my life is in danger and act accordingly. You can't kick me out, Victoria declared, her voice filled with anger and a little bit of desperation. This is my house too. I smiled, my eyes full of mockery, as I pointed out that the house was mine. I built it before we started dating and she knew that. Let's call the cops, I suggested, my voice as cold as ice. I'll explain everything he said tonight. I'm sure they'd be happy to escort him out. Fuck you, Greg declared, his voice full of anger and defiance. Your word against ours. Go ahead and call the cops. We'll say you're delusional. You have all those files on your computer. You let your imagination overtake reality. I had to chuckle. Their game was so dumb. First of all, Greg, what Victoria didn't bother to find out is that I don't just read those stories, I write them. That little scenario is part of one of my stories. Do you know what a BAP is? You both? I asked, my eyes full of challenge. They both shook their heads, not moving. Obviously, this wasn't part of their plan. It stands for burn the bitch or burn the bastard, however you want to look at it. It's a story about a husband getting revenge on his cheating wife and the jerk she's banging. They looked pained, as if they'd been caught red-handed. Greg, get out. Victoria, you can bring your stuff out to the porch. Greg didn't immediately get up to leave. He stared at me, his eyes filled with anger and disbelief. I pulled my cell phone out of my pocket. I was sure the recording had sent our conversation to the cloud. I'd set it up to upload all images because I'd ruined some phones at the job site and lost valuable files. I knew that you could never really clean a cell phone enough after it had fallen into wet cement. I wondered if it would continue recording while I was on the phone. Either way, I'd had enough to go on, so I didn't care. Hey John, I said when my friend answered. I need you to do me a favor. Can you come over to my house ASAP? He asked if it was an emergency. Yeah, Victoria came home tonight with Greg Robinson. Looks like they want to have sex on my bed while I watch. They've been doing it for a year. He's sitting right there at my kitchen table. I ordered him to leave my house, but he's refusing. I need a witness and someone who knows about this beforehand. I warned him that if he comes at me, I'm going to assume he's trying to kill me. The front door's unlocked. He said he'd be right there. I smiled at Greg, who was just staring at me, mouth agape. I swiped my thumb across the icons and dialed another call. Pandora, I need you and Carolyn to drop everything and come over to my house. This is an emergency. She asked if she should call the cops or an ambulance. No, I'll call them right now. Victoria came home with her boss and said she wants to have sex with him on my bed while I watch. They've been cheating for a year. I need witnesses. Please hurry, just come right in. What the hell are you doing? Greg asked in horror. You're telling people? This was supposed to be our little thing. Victoria started crying, tears streaming down her face. But that's not how this was supposed to go, Victoria whimpered. We had a plan. Plans change, I said, my voice cold and unfeeling. She continued, you're only allowed to argue a little about getting cuckolded. Just enough to play the part that you don't want it. A weak protest, but your dick gets hard, so we all know you really do want it. I knew you'd be humiliated, but that was part of the game, she said. I would get tough and tell you to suck it up. This was supposed to be a private game. Just us three. She shook her head, her face full of frustration. At most, you were supposed to storm out of the house and maybe go for a walk, but then you'd think about it and come back to apologize to us. I looked up cuckolding. That's how the stories go. I didn't know if she'd realized or if she was just disappointed that I didn't want to play her sex game. "You're reading the wrong stories, Victoria," I said, my voice filled with mockery. "I suggest you get out of my house, Greg. Victoria, you should pack your stuff. I don't think Pandora and Carol will be careful with your clothes and stuff. Maybe they'll just toss it all on the front lawn." "You're freaking delusional," Greg said, his voice full of anger and defiance. "You have no proof of what really happened. I know you're having cash flow issues and are under pressure to finish those houses. Maybe you're going crazy from stress. Maybe Victoria can even get you locked up for a few days. Our word against yours." He grinned stupidly, like he was in control. "We're leaving, but you'll pay. Think about it. You're just fighting being the cuckold. I don't make me mad, and I'll be nice when you crawl back. You can have sex with Victoria when I'm not using her. Yeah, you can have sex with her after I use her. Make me mad and you're clean. If nothing else, she'll get half your money if you divorce her. Your business will go down the tubes. You'd better say you were joking when those guys show up." He paused for a few seconds, trying to regain his composure. "You really called them? Or are you making it up? I can't believe you'd want to advertise yourself as a cuckold." I wondered about his boasting. Did he really think he could get away with this? I checked my phone to see if it was still recording. It was. I turned the phone so he could see it. His eyes widened in horror. "Oh shit," he whispered. "You didn't." I nodded and grinned, a mocking and triumphant smile. I'd been trying to keep a neutral expression for too long. He could see I was almost enjoying all of this. Now his face became murderous, full of hatred. He stood up. "I gotta kick your ass. I'm going to kill you." I laid my Glock on the table, my hand resting on top of it. Maybe he thought that my telling him I had a weapon was another lie. "You asshole. I'll file charges for threatening me with a gun," he growled, backing away from the table but keeping his eyes full of hate. "Oh yeah. My next call," I said, pressing 911 on the keypad. The operator asked, "What's the nature of your emergency?" I answered truthfully. "Actually, not an emergency yet. Just don't know the police number. My name is David Owens. My wife Victoria and her lover Greg Robinson came home tonight to tell me they'd been having an affair and wanted to have sex on my bed. I told them to leave. Greg Robinson refused. He said he was going to kill me. I want the police to come to my house. I want a record made in case this crazy son of a bitch comes back and throws a Molotov cocktail at my house or attacks me later. I want an official record of the altercation. He's still not leaving my house. He's standing just a few feet from me, across a table. I'm armed and he knows it. If he comes at me, I'm going to assume he's going to take my gun and kill me." I gave her my address and hung up. She said she's sending a unit. I said to Greg, who was now stammering, his face full of fear. John walked in the front door just as I hit the last dial button. I'd done business with Melinda Robinson and her brokerage for years. Of course, she was in my contacts. "Melinda, I know you're out of town visiting your parents with your sons. Greg and Victoria just told me that they came to my house to have sex on my bed." Victoria whimpered in horror. Greg went rigid, as if frozen by shock. John stood there and listened. "Are you actually talking to my wife or just pretending to call?" Greg asked fearfully. Did he still think I was kidding? "Looks like they've been fooling around for a year now. The living room, a hotel, and recently a friend's house. You know that guy named Jim who's divorced and has the boys on weekends? Jim Reynolds, right?" "Oh yeah, that's right," I said and hung up. "So Jim got caught cheating on his wife? No wonder he let you use his house." Melinda said Jim was one of her agents. I didn't think he'd be there long. Pandora and Carol burst through the door, running in as if they were being chased by a nightmare. I saw flashing blue lights through the blinds. The cops were here, too. Pandora stepped outside so the two officers could come in. "Which one of you is David Owens?" the sergeant asked. I introduced myself. "We understand you're armed." I told him I had a Glock in my waistband. "I have a concealed carry permit if he wants to see it." He shook his head. "Maybe later. Can you tell me what the problem is?" "Yes, sir. My wife came home early with this guy." I pointed them out, my voice cold. "They told me they'd been having an affair for about a year and wanted to take things further. They didn't just intend to continue, they wanted me to be okay with it. Even participate to some degree. The words they used were that they wanted me to be a willing cuckold. They expected me to be excited about it. After they confessed, I told them to get out. I ordered Robinson to leave my house. I told my wife to pack her clothes and leave with him. They refused. So I called these people as witnesses, and then called 911. The cop looked bewildered, like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. Why would they think you'd be into cuckolding? He asked. I told them that my wife had stumbled upon some erotic stories on my computer. Some had cuckolding themes. One of my hobbies is writing stories and posting them on erotic story websites, I said, my voice still calm but full of meaning. Are you serious? Pandora asked, laughing. I thought you were just messing with me. I shook my head as she stood there giggling. So the bitch saw those and then confessed to cheating thinking it was one of your fantasies. Oh, that's rich. Even the two cops had a slight smile on their faces. He can't kick me out. This is my house, too, and I invited Greg, Victoria declared, her voice filled with defiance and misplaced confidence. Dave can leave if he wants. I know what I read on his computer. He's a cuckold at heart. He'll crawl back to me because he knows I'll fulfill his fantasies. There's no reason for all of you to be here. We can handle this privately. I didn't hear or see John answer the door. George Adams was standing inside. John explained, I called George on the way here. I thought maybe we needed a lawyer. George, the lawyer John and I had hired for our construction company, was there. His partner had written our prenup. He knew all my legal stuff. Actually, Dave's the sole owner of this house. He built it before you got married. He can kick you out if he wants. It might be in your best interest to do just that. If there's any damage, for instance, he could accuse you of vandalism. I also know there's a tight prenuptial agreement. Greg's phone rang again. It had rung 3 times, but he'd ignored it. This time he answered. Can't talk right now. I've got some stuff to handle. Dave Owens is making all kinds of accusations about Victoria and me. We could all hear Melinda's voice as she said, you better talk to me. I'm on my way home. And if half of what Dave said is true, I'm going to take your balls. I could see smirks spreading across faces around the room. Dave has absolutely no proof of Victoria and me having an affair. No pictures, no witnesses, nothing, he said. His face fell as I started to play back my recording. That's not real evidence we had sex. Yeah, after Victoria saw those files on his computer, she wanted to go all out to fulfill Dave's fantasies. I was intrigued by the idea, so I agreed. But anyway, that recording won't be admissible in court. I know my rights. I have privacy. He didn't tell me he was recording. This last statement was delivered like a drowning man gasping for air. Actually, in this state, it only takes one person to know the conversation is being recorded, George said, his voice confident. And if there's an admission of adultery on that tape, the court will accept it. Greg's face fell again, like he'd just realized he'd made a big mistake. Pandora and Carolyn quickly packed Victoria's clothes into her and Greg's car. They drove off like they were being chased by a wild animal. As they left, so did the cops. Before leaving, the second cop, a beautiful woman, handed me her business card. I'd love to read some of those stories. Hit me up on the web, okay? She winked, her eyes full of challenge. Pandora saw the exchange. Sounds like a chance. She's hot. I bet she's got a killer body under that uniform. I'm gonna get her, she said, her voice confident. I told her I was sure she would. Hey, she's got her own handcuffs. Maybe something kinky you can use in one of your stories. Don't forget to freeze your bank and investment accounts, George advised, his voice experienced. On my to-do list. First thing is to cancel our credit cards. I should do it now. She's probably going to try to make me pay for hotel bills. Maybe she was planning on staying at the most expensive place in town on my dime. I said, my voice cold and determined. I reported the cards stolen so they'd be declined. I told customer service I wanted Victoria removed from the account too. They'd send me a replacement card in a few days. I called Melinda, who I knew was driving home, and advised her to do the same. I was right. Victoria called me 30 minutes later. You asshole. You canceled my credit cards, didn't you? It's a disgrace to be denied. I asked her why she wasn't staying at the Robinsons with Greg. Melinda's driving home. He doesn't want to face her tonight. We stopped by so he could grab some clothes, and he came with me. His card's not working either. I started to chuckle, a smug chuckle. You really messed up a good thing, Victoria said, her voice full of anger and regret. I don't believe your bullshit story that the stuff I found was just for stories you were writing. Maybe it was part of it, but I knew you were a cuckold at heart. You let Pandora do that, lesbian or not. And you two are still friends. You'll go back to her if she'll have you. You'll change. Having sex with me was probably the best thing you've ever had. You're never going to find someone who can rock your boat like I can. I'm hot, and you know it. I get you all riled up every time we do it. You're gonna miss it. Then you'll call me and beg me to come back. And if you're sweet enough begging, maybe I will. She hung up. I had had a long, tiring day. I knew I should be upset that my marriage was over, but I felt oddly satisfied. I realized that although I didn't know about her cheating, I'd been mentally prepared to react. I wondered if Victoria was actually a slut. She'd kept her sexual history a secret. I wondered if there was a legitimate reason for that. I guessed that, in the end, I wasn't that emotionally invested in the marriage. Obviously, she wasn't. I slept like a baby, deep sleep, dreamless, unburdened. I hated having to take time off work to handle the divorce. Thankfully, most of it could be done over the phone. George and his associates handled the legal stuff. Pandora and Carolyn stopped by a few times to check in on me, and once to bring me food. They wanted access to my stories. "Damn it, you don't have any lesbian stories," Pandora complained, her voice full of frustration. I told her I didn't know enough about lesbian psychology to write about it. I suggested that she should teach me. "Not gonna happen," she replied, a mischievous smile playing on her lips. I got some pretty good reviews from them as they started to go through my shorter stories. I was surprised to hear from Victoria the following Sunday. I'd been spending long hours finishing up changes on 2 houses. I found an envelope taped to my front door. I opened it and wondered what she'd say. "I'm surprised you didn't call me. I bet your balls are aching unless you've been jacking off. You've never gone that long without coming since I've known you. Did your hand get tired? I can fix that. Just call and I'll be right over to fix you up. Yeah, you'll have to follow my rules though. I've been reading more. I've learned a lot about female-led relationships. I think you'll like it. You'll be perfectly stress-free when you get home from work. Be the boss at your company and my slave at night. But I'll be a very hot, sexy mistress. I'll drain your balls dry. I won't do all that girly stuff like make you rub my feet or dress up in women's clothes. I know that's not your thing. But I will use your tongue. And that big cock of yours as long as you're good. I haven't decided yet if I'm going to use a cock cage to make sure your cum is only for me. We can explore all of that as time goes on. You might want me to nail your tight little hole. Turn you into my little bitch. Bow down while you read these lines and see if your dick gets hard. I know you crave this and more. I'm taking the letter with my list of things we can negotiate inside and placing it on my desk by the computer. One day, some of that might even show up in one of your stories." Melinda didn't waste time nailing Greg. She took him to the cleaners, literally. It turned out he didn't have a realtor's license. Because of the nature of the business, he didn't get anything from the brokerage in their divorce. He didn't even get half the marital property because they also had a prenup. However, it wasn't as draconian as mine. He got some equity in their house, but that's about it. Melinda had transferred most of their money into the brokerage over the years. She owned the office building. He had to pay child support for his 2 boys, and it was based on his sales history. I heard he had gone back to selling cars but had to hustle, and it was still tough to make ends meet. Victoria was seriously considering going back to teaching. If I hadn't given her the listings for my houses, her income stream would have dried up. She had to split commissions with her broker. The broker who sold the house got half too. Even though she listed all of them, she rarely sold a house. 1.5% for a $300,000 house is $4,500. She'd listed about 2 houses a month during our marriage. We'd lived well and invested the rest of the money. She only got 15% of that. Of course, she and her lawyer complained about the loss of income and wanted me to pay alimony. The prenup ended that. She showed up a couple of weeks after the divorce was final. I was at the job site when she arrived. I noticed she'd traded in her car for a cheap little economy car. "Hi Dave," she greeted me, her voice surprisingly sweet. "I need a place to stay. I can't afford my apartment. I'm really going to blow your mind. You know I can." I smiled, my eyes full of disdain. I wondered what kind of bullshit she was going to come up with. I asked her what had happened with Greg. "He's a dud. His little guy is smaller than yours, and he's not as good in bed. The only thing he's got is looks." "And yet you traded me for him," I said, my voice laced with sarcasm. "No, I never traded you. I admit I wanted both of you. You've asked why I've cheated." She said. The way she used the word was interesting. She didn't say lie. "It's the forbidden fruit thing. It's so naughty, kinky and wild over just regular sex, I can't explain it. It just makes me cum. I had to be careful not to let you know. I was so turned on by seeing it on your computer. I thought I'd get the best of both worlds. Just thinking about it made me cum. Even while we were having sex, I'd picture you servicing me. My handsome man." "Slave," I corrected, intentionally mocking. "Willing servant," she retorted. "We can do that." No marriage, just living together. We'll do all sorts of wild things. You can have your private fantasies and I'll have mine." I had to laugh, a mocking laugh. The look on her face as I sent her away was, I actually can't say I liked it. I simply didn't care. Oh, as a postscript to this post. My ex-wife's first wife, Pandora, was right about the cop who came to my house that night. Under that uniform, Susan had a tight, sexy body. Plus, she was wild in bed. She loved sex and became one of my best fans when I let her read all my stories. She became a beta reader and her comments made my stories better. I only wished her editing skills were as good as her imagination. Pandora was right about something else. Susan had her own handcuffs and loved to use them. On herself.